I'm Linda Fitzgerald. I'm part of the core team for the Seven Mountains Group. And our role is to get things going, get the plates spinning. And so this is one of the plates that we want to spin in terms of health and wellness. We are a county that doesn't have good health rankings. And I'm not going to say any more about that because the experts can talk about that. But I just want to welcome everyone. I have a few people I want to recognize. I have my cheat sheet in my whatever I call this. But I'm going to try to do it from memory. I want to recognize our subcommittee from Seven Mountains Health and Wellness Group, Gabby Davis. Sarah Hall and Robin Richardson registered you in, and they are part of the group as well. Eric Hopkins and Randy Lovins are on the core team with me, and Randy Wolf, who could not get away from his business today. So that's who's brought this event, this workshop today. We are thrilled to have so many people here. We have 64 registrations. We had a couple who were ill and couldn't be here. We're not sure about the rest of the folk, but I'm sure that we'll find them one of these days and get them involved. I'm going to ask Eric Hopkins if he would open us with prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you today for this initiative. How we've come together to better improve our county and our community in health and wellness and livability. It's been said that you can do things that I cannot do, and I can do things that you cannot do, but together we can do great things. And I believe that came from you, Heavenly Father, and I thank you, God, for all those that have come to this collaborative effort to make a difference. Thank you for the food, for the hosts, for all those who have put in the hard work, and a great outcome and a good report. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Gabby Davis, who is going to introduce our first presenters.
Thank you everyone again for showing up and being part of this workshop today. I'm going to go right ahead and get into it. I want to introduce Health by Design with Marjorie Hennessy and Rebecca Payne.
My name is Marjorie Hennessy. I'm a certified urban planner with Health by Design, and I focus on our program and policy initiatives. This is Rebecca Payne, and she can talk a little more about herself in a second, but I'm going to kick us off. And really quickly, so based on what we were told from Linda and what y'all are trying to achieve, this is kind of the things we're going to try to focus on for our talk. Healthy communities, civic and cultural identity, and economic development. And all of those things kind of contribute to what we refer to as placemaking, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through. Sorry. I prefer not to, and they said they can hear me. Everybody said they can hear me. Oh, do you need it for the recording? I can. I would just prefer not to use it. Okay, so the organization that I am with, Rebecca is with, is called Health by Design. We've been operating in Indianapolis for about 15 to 16 years. And we are focused on this kind of intersection between the built environment and public health. And so how does the world around us and how we design and create our communities affect long-term public health and health outcomes? And we collaborate across multiple sectors: planning, design, civic infrastructure, things like community leaders, schools, school districts, all of that kind of stuff, to promote healthier communities and build and shape healthy communities. And we focus a lot on how to invest in our communities through public participation efforts like what y'all are doing here today, all the way through to what does it physically look like, and how can that shape long-term health outcomes and make our communities healthier, but also more livable and vibrant, and serve as an economic platform to create destinations and encourage folks to visit your community, even if they don't live there long term. And so if you think back to biology class, this is a DNA strand, a strand of DNA. And we like to use this sort of as a description of, there's two things, or how we get our work done, the how and the why, right? And so the how we do things, or the what we do, I should say. We focus on things like equity, complete streets, things like I said before, daily destinations. How do you create daily destinations in your community, and through infrastructure and community design? So those are all the what's, that's the what we do. But the how is equally important and interacts with the what we do. And so the how we do that is we focus on building partnerships. We focus on supporting community groups like y'all through technical assistance, how to build capacity at the local level to keep projects going forward, and we try to provide trainings. And then we also like to recognize how all of those things interact, and there are lots of elements at play that affect what our communities look like and how they look and feel, and how you start to create that sort of, again, vibrant, healthy community that y'all are after. So this is a diagram that we got from healthycommunities.org that we love to use because it really does drive home that concept of intersectionality. There are lots and lots and lots of elements that contribute to a healthy community and a vibrant community that folks want to live, work, and play in. We're going to focus on a few key ones today. So we have limited time. Trust me, we could talk all day today about this stuff if you wanted us to. But the key ones that we're going to focus on today for y'all are transportation options, community safety, economic opportunity, community design, and parks and recreation. Those are really kind of in the wheelhouse of what we do. But again, keep in mind there are lots of other factors that we won't touch on, but y'all are going to be talking about them, I think, later on today and with Marcia and Kate. And again, another reason of why do we do this thing. Has anybody ever heard of this concept of zip code health? Yeah, right? So, as Linda mentioned, that you're experiencing kind of less than desirable health outcomes here in Fayette County. And that is not unheard of. That's a concept that we see across the United States in all different cities and communities, rural, urban. And it's summed up in this quote about, your blood pressure is important, your glucose levels are important, all of these other metrics that doctors tell you about when you go to your annual checkup. But the actual thing that affects your long-term health most is your zip code, because the built environment and what we grow up around and what we live in and interact with every day is just as influential on how your long-term health is going to look and feel. And so that's really important to us in our work, and again, ties back to that whole concept of where does public health and the built environment interact. And this is a model that we use to frame our work from. This is called the PSE model, which is the Policy Systems and Environment. No need to memorize it or anything like that, but the concept is very important because we often focus on individuals when we talk about a health outcome or developing programs, programs tend to focus on how to interact with the individual level, but really, it's this outer level public policy decisions that affect individuals, right? And so we're really interested and focused on, we call it upstream work. So what policies are at play? Because the policies affect the shape of the community affects the institutions like schools, where we live and work, libraries, things like that. And all of that then filters down into the individual effect, right? So in order to improve life and communities for individuals, you actually have to take a bigger step further away to be able to implement those changes. And we like to use this slide. Has anyone ever seen this slide before? It's been making the rounds. It's from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The work that we do, it's also really important to lead from an equity standpoint. But we'd also like to point out that there's a pretty significant difference between equality and equity. So equality is everybody gets the same thing, right? Everybody, and in this instance, everybody gets a bike. But if you're a real tall person, taller like Rebecca versus a short person like me, the same size bike is not going to work for us, right? If you have a physical disability, you're going to need an adaptation. If you're a child, you're not going to be able to ride an adult bike, right? But that's what equality is everybody gets the same thing and then you go about your day. We're really interested in equity and everybody having the tool that they need or the adaptation that they need to be able to move through their environment. And when you approach this work from that equity lens, then you start to see real changes happening and everybody being able to make the modifications and access what they need. And it's really important. How many of you all have heard of redlining before? Right? So the reason that we put this in, we're not going to spend a ton of time on it, but the reason that equity is so important to the work we do and the built environment is because of things like redlining, which happened in the mid-1930s, but we still see the repercussions and the effects of those planning decisions and what was done in the built environment today, and multiple populations, mostly black and brown folks, being completely having their communities ripped apart and devastated, and they're still recovering and still trying to repair those decisions. And so that's why it's really, really important to approach the work from an equity standpoint. And I think I'm turning it over.
Can everybody hear?
Sorry.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so Marjorie just spent a second laying the foundation for why and how we do the work that we do, and I know you all are here today to hear more about how this kind of work can contribute to economic development. Before I touch on that, which will be at the end of this presentation, I do want to take a second to talk you through the elements. Marjorie had showed you a slide earlier that had an image of a wheel with color blocks, and each block was an element that factors into community health. Within that slide, there were 5 blocks pulled out individually. And so those are the ones I want to take a moment to talk about, and then tie it all together to the economic opportunities that can be created. So the first element of a healthy, active community and vibrant community is transportation options. And if you want your community members to get out and about and be a contributing part of the economic system, then it is really ideal to make available transportation options. And they don't have to be ornate, detailed, or high-level, high-tech offerings, but the more options you can give to your residents related to transportation, the more you are going to provide access to the areas in town where they might go to recreate or spend money or learn or simply play. And I do want to touch on this, from our perspective, transportation options correlate to the equity and equality component that Marjorie just chatted about. So it's one thing to offer transportation options, but do be sure that they are accessible to everybody in your community, regardless of income, race, or mobility. So that's element one in a healthy community. Element two is community design. And this infographic is pretty busy, so you don't have to take the time to read the details, but really what this is illustrating is a concept called complete streets. Has anybody heard of complete streets? Great, I see a few heads nodding. So this idea sort of involves the concept that if you design a street to accommodate and attract all users, including motorists, then you are creating a space where people can come together while the road is serving a purpose of being a road. So you allow for buses and bikers and walkers, and it's a complete street. It serves everybody in the system that needs to get around and move. And these are really key. This is a I don't want to say trending, but the concept of complete streets is really taking off across the nation because it's proven to be very effective in bringing people out and getting people to move around in their communities, which that does have a tie. Your ability to move around and go out and about does have a tie to the economic influence, or it can influence economic development and opportunities.
Can I say something? Two things. We will make a PDF of these slides and get them to Linda so she can distribute them so you guys can have copies of it. But to Rebecca's point, this idea of complete streets is about making streets places. They are places that people need to use and need to be in. But for so long in our history of planning and designing communities, we really have relegated them to just being corridors, moving from here to here. But they are places that people want to be in. Like you think about vibrant downtown areas, they are streets lined with interesting places, interesting shops and cafes and things like that. And so it's about embracing the street or the corridor and creating a place all along it and treating it like a place that people need and want to be in rather than just something that they're passing through or across.
Right. Thanks, Marjorie, for adding that information. And related to that concept is the idea of third spaces, which is a place where it's not work and it's not home. And so there's a big push across the nation to sort of highlight the importance of these third spaces as community building areas and economic sort of stimulus areas. So the complete streets can help you get to a third space. Lots of good reasons to do a complete street, not simply just from a safety standpoint, but also from sort of a capacity or community engagement standpoint as well. Okay, so our next element here is parks and recreation. Parks and recreation is important because it's a way for people, when parks and recreation opportunities are made available to community members, it just is one more opportunity for folks to lead an active lifestyle and engage with their community members. So we wanted to put this Parks and Recreation slide up there because it helps to build community culture and identity, and it can actually improve median home values. So there's been a lot of economic analyses done around the existence of parks and recreation in terms of the market. And you can see this statistic here that property values for homes near parks they can sell up to $2,262 more than homes without parks nearby. So that's a pretty poignant, I think, message there as it relates to the importance of parks and recreation. Oops. Okay, and related to parks and recreation, trails is another feature that's getting a lot of attention for good reason. Trails can be a real draw for a community if you can offer trails, whether they're, wooded trails or just through parkway trails. They're a very attractive component to incorporate in your community, and they can also have an economic influence as well. And I'll just read this so I don't mess up the stats, but trails contribute to $689 billion in outdoor recreation consumer spending, supporting 4.3 million jobs nationwide. So that is a pretty profound number for considering how trails can sort of help your economic base. And then in Indiana alone, this equates to nearly $10 billion annually and supports nearly 100,000 jobs, and that was data from 2020. So again, like Parks and Recreation, trails as an element can play a role in your economic development, in your community vitality, and can all help support active living. I'm going to skip this one for now. Okay, so finally, element 4, economic opportunities. And this is, I think, why Linda wanted us to stress this element quite a bit here in this presentation. So economic opportunities, every town, every community is always looking for economic opportunities. And we're starting to understand as professional planners and public health practitioners that some of the old traditional indicators of economic health aren't pulling in the same sort of businesses that they once were. And so now, what we're starting to look at is this concept of quality of life and place. And so, again, I'm just going to read this slide because I think it's very poignant. Quality of life and place are more effective than many traditional economic development tools, including incentives and lower taxes. And that's kind of a novel idea. Like, this is not us doing business as usual. A lot of people don't really stop to think about quality of life as a driver in the economy of your community. And then amenities such as recreation opportunities and activities and excellent services. Again, those services include transportation options and school districts are likely bigger contributors to healthy local economies than traditional business-friendly measures. So this is not the same way of doing business. So we're looking at the quality of life, and that is what is suddenly driving people's decision to move or live in a community, and then when that happens, economic opportunities abound.
I was just going to say too, like, a lot of the data that we're seeing out there is also noting that I think Zoomers, the current youngest generation, that these are the things they're looking for when they choose to locate somewhere for a job. They want employers that have transportation alternatives for them to be able to make multiple choices to get to work. They want communities that have some sort of a trail network so that they can use their commute to work as their exercise and not go to a gym after work and walk on a treadmill or whatever. They want to be able to shop small. They want to visit local businesses that they can pop in and pick something up on their way home from work or to work, and they want to be able to support local businesses in that way. And so the whole concept, again, of like a trail network, whether it's a wooded, hiking trail versus a multi-use path of some kind, but having just, again, those options and that network throughout their community so that they can support other folks in their community is a huge attractant for how they choose where they're going to live and where they're going to work. And big employers are starting to notice that too when they're looking to locate, a campus of some kind, especially tech companies and things like that. And Now, in the post-COVID world where there's still a lot of hybrid working, they are still, like, this is the number one factor. If they are going to have a brick and mortar type work campus, like, these are the things that they're looking for. And if you can't check all those boxes, then they're going to try and find another community that does.
Yeah, great input there, Marjorie. And then related to that, so the things that we've been talking about, quality of life and the ability to lead an active lifestyle, it's been determined that those features can actually lead to productive workers. And then taking that into consideration, we have learned that businesses are willing to pay higher real estate prices and offer higher wages to locate in places where they're with more productive workers. So if you can get productive workers, then you are going to be attracting these businesses. And finally, so elements 4 and 5. 4, again, is economic opportunity. Element number 5 is community safety. And I wanted to combine those two elements in this slide. What you're looking at here is an intersection on the left in a small community outside of Indianapolis proper. And you can tell that there had been little investment in it, no real life, nothing there to activate it. I mean, nothing appealing or attracting to bring people to this intersection. And then suddenly the cultural trail, we shift over here to the right, the cultural trail is installed and comes right through this intersection. And consequently, businesses are interested in locating here now at this intersection. And so it went from sort of bleak, uninteresting, why would we go there, to a destination that people really, truly are excited to go. And coupled with that, they can go there on a safe, protected trail. So safety is, it's one thing to bring in trails and businesses, but you need to make sure that they can be safely accessed by your community members. So lighting, pavement marking, wayfinding, those kinds of things. So the two elements tied together pretty nicely in this photograph here. And then most interesting to note is that after the development occurred, thanks to the cultural trail that was installed, property values around the area went up 149%, which is remarkable. And average spending was $37 a day by user. So that is quite an improvement, just thanks to the change in the intersection. And then finally, safe, equitable access for all modes. I've already touched on that, but because we had safe access and equitable ways to get to this intersection, I mean, it enabled people to go, and it was inviting. And so that was sort of all the ingredients you needed to activate this corner and attract businesses and get the money flowing here at this intersection. So this is a huge success and one we like to use as an example, especially related to economic opportunities and development.
How many folks have been to Indianapolis or experienced the cultural trail at all, or seen the cultural trail? So that's the leg of it that goes from downtown into Fountain Square, which was a neighborhood that was experiencing a lot of economic depression and things like that. And then, like the picture on the left, and because I'm gonna start going into placemaking and stuff now. So the picture on the left is what it was like, and people like to visit activated spaces. Like they want to visit spaces that are authentic and have some kind of an identity and some kind of a cultural attraction. They like to see spaces with other human beings in them, and so that's something that you're not going to see on this picture on the left. And then, like Rebecca mentioned, once the cultural trail came through, there are multiple businesses all along there. There are people walking and riding bikes and rolling through that space constantly. That's a restaurant right there on the corner where you can sit and people watch. And even if the trail wasn't there, that space would be a little more activated now, just because people see people and they want to come to those spaces. And so that's all of these things that we've been talking about. The result, like I mentioned at the beginning, and that what we wanted to impart with you folks is placemaking, ultimately economic development when you're talking about broader scale and community level is about placemaking and finding the assets that you have already in your community and creating unique, authentic experiences and spaces that people want to be in and want to live near and want to visit on a daily basis. This one in particular, this is an old pump house. It's in a small town in upstate New York that was dilapidated, obviously not being used, but some folks with an idea in a community meeting came along and decided that it was something that they could create a space from. And so they left the walls of the building, they cleaned it up, they put in a new flooring system. It's not an actual hard floor or anything, but they put in accessible flooring and groundwork so that people can move around in it. They brought in, it's a little hard to see, but in this back here you can see, they brought in 2 shipping containers that were refitted for commercial kitchen. So there's a commercial kitchen on site, they strung up the lights, they cleaned it up, they added movable seating cannot be overstated. Movable seating, and now it is on Friday nights, they do First Fridays or whatever with arts and artists and things like that. It's rented, you can rent it out as a venue, so folks get married there, folks have anniversary parties there. When the weather, obviously it's upstate New York, so it doesn't always get used, but when the weather is nice, they are able to generate revenue, and then different caterers and things like that get jobs working there. And it's a unique event space, and it's tied to the identity of this small community. This is Fort Wayne, Indiana, which had a really depressed and not much happening downtown area. They embraced their local artists and started putting in art installations. This is an art installation, and it's also a bike rack right in front of the library, where they play on perspective. So like this one obviously is a little bit smaller, and so there's different size bike racks for different size bikes. Little kids love to talk about the funny statue in front of the library when they ride their bike. They also have this Art This Way program. When you're walking down the sidewalk, you'll encounter Art This Way spray painted on the sidewalk. And then, oops, you'll turn a corner and they've done all of these unique murals in their alleyways, which also were not being used and were kind of scary. And they went through and cleaned them up, hung up different lights. And so the alleys, which are not big enough for cars, they're not car alleys, they're people alleys. They are sort of a secondary transportation network for people to be able to move around downtown and not have to walk near the cars or cross the streets necessarily and things like that. Connections to nature. This is actually also Fort Wayne, but again, small rural towns across Indiana have all kinds of unique assets. People love visiting farms. People love visiting smaller communities where they can go to a farmer's market and actually see the farmers, right, that grew the food that they're buying, or have access to a riverfront or something like this. So this is an amphitheater that they developed along the edge of the river. They can have outdoor events, concerts, vendors and things like that. And then on the other side of the river, they have this elevated walkway that loops around. So there's a loop trail that goes around and across the river. The other thing that we wanted to talk about too is engagement, which you guys are already doing, right? You're all here and you've had some events leading up to today. But for this work to be successful, you have to be engaging everybody in the community and making sure you're getting input from folks. And it's really hard to do. Smaller towns, it's maybe not as difficult. Bigger towns, it's definitely difficult to get people into one place. And so we like to just remind folks that when it comes to engagement, sometimes you have to get really creative and you want to make sure you're meeting people where they are and earning their trust and or rebuilding trust in some cases. Like I mentioned before, things like redlining happened in a lot of communities. And so communities are distrustful of folks coming in and saying, we're going to do something for your community and we're going to make it better. And so so just getting really creative about how you engage folks and how you bring them together. This is a community that they were trying to have public meetings with, and they were having very limited to no success. People weren't showing up. And so they started looking at, well, how are they setting up their meetings? And it's like, well, if you're only having one meeting at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday at the City Hall or Town Hall, you know, the probability of folks being able to get there or wanting to get there or trusting that facility are slim to none in some cases. And so what this organization did was they brought out furniture and they set up a living room in the park. And then people came outside and wanted to know what was happening, and they saw their friends and they saw their neighbors and they saw their coworkers, and then they came out and they were able to really have meaningful discussions and get to the core of the issue. So just again, when it comes to engagement, and once you guys have like the big ideas that are going to come out of today, just making sure that you really look at different ways to engage people so you're getting as much public buy-in as possible. And then we'll kind of finish with this is intention. Again, you guys are already here and you're doing the work. But as a reminder, and I think Kate and Marcia are going to talk about this too, is that this work is kind of slow going. So don't get discouraged, especially by like the inertia, we say the inertia of the status quo. It takes a lot of intention and commitment, but it's worth it in the end. And again, we'll give you guys these slides, and they'll have, these are just some examples of some success stories of different kinds of projects around economic development that we wanted to, you know, kind of refer you to for inspiration. And with that, I think we'll just, we'll wrap it up so that we make sure we talk to everybody else. And yeah, our emails are on here. We're happy to, I don't know how much time you want for questions, Linda.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we can take a few questions if you have any. We're happy to connect later as well. Go ahead.
I'm Alexandra, and I'm curious about whether or not you have any data or any anecdotal stories about the importance of incorporating green space into developments. It seems like it's a struggle sometimes. And whether it matters if it's like turf versus actual grass, or if it's just giving that space, because traditionally I think that that's not always been a priority.
Yeah. So I don't have hard data numbers off the top of my head, but like back on that slide about complete streets, like that is one of the elements of complete streets. Complete streets is green space. Human beings just need to see it. First of all, like the ability to, like I said, that can also be a draw, an economic driver for luring folks to come and visit for the day, as they want to come and see a bucolic, beautiful pastoral landscape, right? Especially if they live in cities. But just being able to look out your window and see green or see trees, there's tons of research out there about how that affects your mental health, or having a plant in your house, right? But when we think about complete streets, we think about a couple of different things. One, just like a buffer strip between the street where the cars are and then the spaces where people are moving. Like that's important. It makes you feel safer. It reduces noise. It reduces the temperature. You know, shade trees, things like that. Having green space near buildings helps with the climate control and the cost of heating and cooling buildings. But then also having, again, a destination. Like, I'm going to go outside and take a walk to the park. Once I get there, maybe it's just a big green field and I'm going to watch some kids play, or I'm going to play ball with my son or whatever. And then I'm going to come back home. So yeah, regardless of whether it's a programmed green space where like there's a playground and there's a basketball court and, you know, whatever, or it's just a grassy field. It's great though because it becomes a destination. Whether you're going to actually actively use it or not is beside the point. I think most municipalities are kind of moving towards like in their design and development standards. New development, there's usually a requirement for some kind of green space and or trail network to get through. But when you look at older neighborhoods and developments, it's not the ability to retrofit or retroactively put something in is great, or at least create a connection so that you can easily get to one within a mile walk or less is ideal, for sure.
Can I ask? So yeah, Marjorie hit on a really important point. If you're in a community that's struggling to get green space through provided developments, then one place to look is at your county land use or your zoning code, because a lot of communities are starting to put in, like codify the requirement to have green space. And so in order for developments to pass all the requirements that they need to pull a permit to build, one of those would be green space. So you can sort of, if that's an issue and concern of yours, you can sort of start to lean on your elected officials, honestly, and start the conversation about, we need to incorporate this requirement of green space, because we do know that it does play a very important role in mental and physical health and also economic, it is an economic driver. But the place to make that change would be probably your county or the municipal level. So you'd want to make sure that stuff's starting to get codified. And actually, complete streets is actually something that gets codified a lot in zoning ordinances. So there's actual mechanism to write that in and hold developers to that requirement.
Now, there are 32-ish complete streets policies or ordinances across the state of Indiana, and NDOT also has one. So if any of the roads like through Connersville have NDOT jurisdiction, like that's somewhere where you can push back on them when they're coming through and updating or whatever, be like, well, what's going on with your complete streets policy? Because they are supposed to,
They'll stay around for a while to ask questions, and we may get them back. Just for a section with Help by Design, because there's a lot of information that we can gain, and part of the coalition model is education. So we love to do that. I'm going to introduce the next presenters, but first I want to introduce to all of you a woman you already know, but she just received a great honor. So let's give her a round of applause, Becky Marble, who is Wellness Coordinator of the Year by Purdue. And she's been working on health and wellness. When Help by Design was here in 2016 for an active living workshop, Becky was the only person from them who actually began to take the information and work on it. So the whole idea of a coalition is to work together. So we can all work together and we can support one another and support the work that she's already put into this. So I want to introduce, and I have to read this because they wrote it down for me phonetically. Kate Rubinier. Did I do it right? Kate and Marcia Slichter are with the Oxford Coalition, and they came the end of March and gave a workshop to about 18 people, and from that we did coffee chats. We identified 3 areas that group felt we needed to focus on. That's why we have a youth table, a livability table, and addictions table. You would think, looking at the addictions table, that we don't have any issues with that. But perhaps they're all now working with addictions. So that's why we have the 3 work groups identified, because they said those were the areas that we needed to focus on. So we asked Kate, who is a township trustee. Marcia has been a township trustee, correct?
Yes.
And Marcia has been a mayor of Oxford.
I have.
Kate, excuse me. And also, Kate also teaches at Miami University. So they're going to talk to us about the coalition model. Then Gabby Davis will be introducing us to our work for the day. And it's actually ongoing work.
And typically, the computer doesn't seem to be working.
Please use the
But we do
microphone.
have your, we did give you paper copies of the PowerPoint on your table. Yes.
Okay. I'll go ahead and get started. I have a few technical difficulties here. My name's Marcia Schlichter. I'm actually a former retired school nurse from Talawanda City Schools, and I am a representative for the Riley Township for the coalition in Oxford. Kate is the former mayor of Oxford. She represents Oxford Township. A little bit about our community, if you know where Oxford is over the line here. I could walk to Indiana from my farm in Riley Township. That's how we're neighbors. But Oxford is obviously where Miami University is, so we're a very diverse community. But the townships are all part of one of the largest school districts in Butler County. So we have a lot of outlying rural areas that are also involved in our coalition. So it's the city of Oxford plus other outlying areas that are townships. So that's kind of the makeup of that. We do have a director of our coalition. Her name is Amy Macheko. She would have been here today, but she was unable to make it. So you have a Kate and Marcia show. She is actually funded as the wellness coordinator for the Talawanda School District in Oxford. But through grants and other initiatives, she is a full-time employee now and coordinates with our coalition. Two things we are not a 501c3, and we are not a treatment facilitator. We are more of an umbrella coordinating coalition to gather people together. I know you're all doing health-related things, but I guess there's safety in numbers. The funding, when you're correlating in a coalition, the funding is, oh wow, they've got their stuff together. So we've been actually fortunate. We've been at this 20 years, so have patience. Our first group was 8 people around the table, so I am so impressed. You're doing a wonderful job getting started. So I was still in the district working, and we started very slow, baby steps, but we're now growing leaps and bounds. So we're so happy to be here today. So we're going to talk to you a little bit.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. All right.
So,
I love that presentation from those folks there. So what Marcia and I were talking about is how do you get to these great ideas that they're talking about? And we want to talk about how we have gotten not to such great places as they described, but close to them great places. So again, the Coalition for Healthy Communities. And we are a group that's been 20 years in the making. And, oh, wait a minute. Let's see if I can figure out these dynamics here. Whoa. So we want to talk about how we kind of actually did it. Oops. Come on. I think we are. There we go. First of all, as you know here, everybody has a role to play. Substance abuse organizations, we have these PowerPoints on your table if you might want to look at the actual names here. It's all hard to read. Not working? Yeah. And one of the things Marcia and I talked about on the drive over here is the importance of having some major institutions aligned with the coalition. So in our coalition, some of the founding organizations were the local hospital, local university, the school district, and the city. And they still continue to contribute financially to our directors, half of our directors' pay, and they play a role in the Leadership Council back there, hello. There's always a representative from one of those organizations there. So to have an actual institution, and the institution really helps, for example, in a very practical way, these copies were made at the school yesterday. Don't tell the superintendent, but And we often use rooms in the hospital. I mean, there are actual places that institutions provide that really help us, and also their staff. So there is a community engagement staff at the local hospital who's been a co-coordinator of the organization for quite a long time, and the university as well. So to have all these, and then other organizations as well, including civic and volunteer organizations. Law enforcement, very important partner in coalition work. What are coalitions? A coalition is a formal arrangement for cooperation and collaboration between groups or sectors of the community in which each group retains its identity, but all agree to work together towards a common goal. So as Marcia said early on, it makes it kind of complicated because it's hard to say like what you're not a place, you're not a volunteer organization, you're not a, but you're a lot of different things. So but that's specifically what coalitions are. And here's our current structure, which looks a lot like the structure that you guys are laying out here. We have a leadership team, which I see in this group way at the back. And then we have 3 work groups: alcohol and other, drug prevention work group, mental health work group, and active living and healthy living. The middle line, sustainability and cultural competence, are they're not work groups, Marcia, they're organizations that we picked up recently. Sustainability for us means financial sustainability because much of our work relies on grant work. So this is trying to figure out everything from like how to manage our accounting to how to apply to grants and look for grants. Cultural competence is how we're reaching out to members of our communities who we may not have reached out to already. So we had a Zoom, the mental health group had a Zoom meeting with the local NAACP about local mental health issues facing people of color in our community. And we've reached out also to the Hispanic community in town. So, is there anything else?
Your work groups are youth and livability. If you put those in, where we have mental health and active living, it should look the same. We want to focus on sustainability. One way we do that is we do a memorandum of understanding with the townships. So they have to sign an agreement that they will send a representative to the coalition, basically so they just don't forget about us. And that's one way we sustain. If I can't go or function in that capacity one year, then they will assign someone else with the MOU to sustain that. That's just one small part of sustainability, trying to give you some concrete ideas. And every group should always focus on the cultural competence. So.
We also provided the Constitution Board, our rules and regulations for you there, our bylaws, which we had the Leadership Committee had a special meeting about 5 years ago with a consultant who helped us write bylaws. And we were like, do we need bylaws? We're not a real organization. Well, we did, because we needed to formalize ourselves in some way. So those bylaws
I
are
have a
there.
copy of that. We won't be going over that. But that's especially for the leadership team that may help you. And list all of the people that you have involved in our coalition.
The work groups meet probably once a month, and then they report to the leadership team, which meets every 2 months. And the work groups are ongoing. They really are the heart and energy of the organization. Other aspects of our structure: chair people for each work group report to the leadership team. So there's someone on the leadership team who's also the chair of one of those work groups. The bylaws, we just talked about. The MOU is really important. Again, I didn't think the MOU would be that important, but at the university, for example, we have a health coordinator who is a co-coordinator of one of the work groups, and she has to let her boss know every year that part of her time is being spent on the coalition work. And that's really important. That MOU is just a short meeting where you say, yeah, remember, I'm doing this work with the coalition. This is the amount, I'm not getting paid for it, but I want you to know that in my workload, this is part of the work that I'm doing. We also have a evaluation service, the Epiphany Community Services, who helps us in a lot of evaluations, and grants and fiscal sponsorship. We have a few key grants from Cincinnati that have helped us out. And we started out with the federal grant, a drug-free federal grant, but we also have sort of local grants from the local community foundation that provide support, United Way, other local organizations, and we have a fund set up at the local community foundation if people just want to donate stuff in certain ways. Yeah. Tools to build a coalition, why it works and why it is different. So SAMHSA is the
Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Agency.
right.
And it's a nationwide thing. SAMHSA.org, we use that quite a bit. It's such a good resource. At www.samhsa.gov, sorry. It's a good resource for data-driven information. It's a very good resource.
I've been amazed as someone who is not trained in public health or social work, how many organizations there are out there to support this kind of an organization, from everything from assessment tools to data analysis to ways to think about how to go about our work. So SAMHSA is certainly one of them. We also, this is a key, March and I really like this slide, environmental change strategy. So the idea here, as these two mentioned earlier, it's not that we go into a community and say, we got to fix you, and we have a bright idea. No, we want to provide the dirt and and maybe even some of the support and water so that they can grow their own health. So we do that by providing information, providing support, building skills, increasing access and reducing barriers, changing consequences, physical design change as much as possible, and policy change. Sort of going in that order. So in one small high poverty community in our city, which I've been working with Amy quite closely, we've gone in and we started talking to the residents there and have supported them in building a residence council. So those residents now, who are now living in subsidized housing, have a residence council to which they can suggest and have suggested ideas for improving things, like for, they've got a bug problem at the place, they've got issues with their lease, HUD housing, it's got a lot of issues going on. But every time a problem comes up, we go back to the resident, and they raise it to Amy or I, we say, well, what does a residence council think? So we get the resident, and we provided them with tools and support, access to lawyers and other kinds of people. Just we've been networking with them so that they can work on the solutions. To me, that's one of the really important parts of community coalition work, is you're helping others help themselves. And then also this logic model, which again, I didn't really understand at first when it first came out, but it's a way to think about how to solve local solutions. 3 key questions. What is the problem? Why is it a problem? Why is it a problem here? So what is the problem? See, poverty, drugs, misery, whatever. But, kind of get down to what is the problem? Why is it a problem? And why is it a problem in this actual community? And it's important, this important point, that substance misuse, supports for youth, and livability look very different in Fayette County than in Oxford, Ohio. So for this group, your work is identifying what the problem is, why it's a problem, and why it's a problem here in Connersville. Community work takes time, yes. We've been at it for 20 years. Marcia was at the original table where people started to talk about it. I've been involved for about 5 or 10 years, I think, and it just takes time. But we've gained legs. We now have the city pays attention to us. The local foundation people know who we are. And we've had every small bit of success that we have, every small workshop we've run has led to more and more successes. Did you talk about the parks? Can you talk about Riley Park?
I can. A little bit about my township. Riley Township is a rural area, a farming community that had their own school that then consolidated with the Talahoma City Schools. That's been probably 30 years ago. So the school was a community center with a playground that was not in very good shape. The ball diamonds where the kids used to play at didn't look so great. So partnering with the coalition, we were able to have a meeting. Now, this was in 2018. Amazing how time goes, especially when you get COVID in there. With some community members, and some of them pointed out, the kids are riding their bike. 732 is a state highway that goes through Riley to Oxford. The kids are riding their bikes on the highway. One safety concern. Look at the playground. What are we going to do? The ball fields were just
playground set. And then, the most amazing thing, the Cincinnati Reds came and redid our ball diamonds. So it's just beautiful. We're slow. We actually had a movie night this past early in the fall where we had a movie outside and people came. So we're working on it. But with the help of the coalition, we've been able to partner with people that probably most of the people in Nottingham Township didn't even know up until this effort. So that's a good news for us.
I love that story. I love that story partially because I am a township trustee and I know how slow government works and how township trustees in Ohio are not necessarily interested in social engagement or community engagement. They're, our tasks are roads and police. But Marcia and other residents, including some young moms, you said, and the coalition came together and started talking to the township trustees and said, listen, this is a really good idea. Why don't you get behind it? And they did. And they've shown up. They showed up at the ribbon cutting and everything else, all three of these guys. Yeah. It's been really wonderful. So that is a great success. Let's see what else I got here. Whoa. So celebrate successes, yeah. Nothing about us without us, do with and not for, as I mentioned earlier. Also, bright ideas, which I know you guys are about to work on, that have worked for us. We work at the community level. Plant the Promise is every fall. We plant red tulip bulbs around the town, and we always get kids to be involved in this. We found we plant them around the city building, around businesses, around homes, anybody who wants them. So Amy's gotten a grant, I don't know from who, to get these tulip bulbs.
I'm connected with Red Ribbon Week and the Drug Take Back. We see these tulips come up in the spring, they're red, they're all over there now in the townships, and it just gives you, the conversation can be around what a beautiful life it is to be drug-free and alcohol-free. So that's kind of, and then we have signs, Plant the Promise, and it's just red tulips everywhere. You could do daffodils if you don't like the tulips. But just that, plant the promise of having a drug-free life. That's what the theme of that is.
We got a mascot, Rox the Fox, who was designed by a middle school kid, I think. Yeah. And then someone, I don't know who it is, I think it's Rox the Fox, but someone puts on this really hot uniform and shows up at everything, like anything that you need. And the kids love run to Rox and do whatever, Rox is a cool looking character. So I think a mascot really helped a lot. Is there law enforcement here? I think I see one back there, yeah. So Federal Drug Take Back Day every fall and every spring has been a real organizing activity for us because law enforcement runs it, law enforcement has to run it, but community members get involved in it, and we've organized around it information to people about what to do with your expired drugs. Probably a good idea to clean out those expired drugs that are in your cabinet especially if you've got teenage grandchildren who are visiting. It's a bad idea to flush them down the toilet. It's a wrong idea to put them in the sewer system. So here's what you do: bring them here, and law enforcement can provide access to them and can support them. So we always have a place at the city and in Oxford Township and probably in other townships coming up where that happens. Yeah.
Mr. John has taken part in the Drug Take Back initiative several times.
Excellent. So this group needs to coordinate with law enforcement on that because it becomes a healthy activity. I mean, I think originally Drug Take Back Day was a law enforcement activity. Now it's a law enforcement activity and a healthy activity. People begin to learn about how has to do with maintaining healthy lives in our own houses and in our own communities.
Especially if you have an older population here, which I think in time in the city, the grandkids come to visit, and grandma doesn't know what to do with all those old meds, and it's just a safety concern. So that's good.
We did a special training, special drug take back at the retirement community, specifically for that reason, and nursing homes, and education about it. So it's a really interesting way to get people talking with each other about healthy activities. Harm reduction, we've started some harm reduction with our local county harm reduction initiatives with a incoming needle exchange and also a traveling bus that's providing not just opiate addiction support, but also other kind of health support to high areas, high incident areas. And also medication safety tools and presentations. So we have some, we always are passing around these bags where you can put your meds in and it will, they'll disintegrate in there. We pass out coalition weekly drug things, you know, so people can just think more, just get people thinking more about their prescription drugs. And then we have a lot of work in the youth, which is why the school district is so important in coalition work, youth-led preventions at schools. We have a number of groups called the YITS, the Youth Action Team, the BITS, the
Youth Initiative Team, and even a group at Miami.
There's a Miami team called the MITS. So that they have these funny names kind of helps. And they come to the leadership team meetings too. So these are youth who are planning like Friday afternoon movies, Friday evening movies for kids, or alternate things to do on prom night, or safety lessons for their classmates. Getting the youth involved have been very, very important. And we've done that in part by focusing on developmental assets, and also the PACS Good Behavior game and PACS Tools, which is a program that's used at the school for developing peaceful conflict resolution activities amongst kids at schools. And then in terms of livability, we've done a lot of what these folks talked about. We did some walking audits where, and this was with help like with this group who we may bring to Oxford now to do again. Walking audits, we brought community members together to walk down certain key corridors in the town that were really kind of a problem and see why they were a problem. What is the problem? Why is it a problem? Why is it a problem here? Well, you know, is it because the streets are uneven? It's when you're walking down a pavement that you find out that the path is uneven, and so somebody in a wheelchair or with a baby carriage can't go along that path. Or the path just ends, you know, you're walking along a sidewalk and then suddenly the sidewalk ends. You see that when you're doing a walk audit. We've created a food access map and calendar, and then the Riley Park renovation, which Marcia just talked about. And that's it for us. We love the work we do with the coalition. We've been going for 20 years. We just keep it going with volunteers just like you all, but we're all friends now, and we all would like to work together, and we have enough of a focus that we know what it is that we're doing, and we're committed to what we're doing, and we're working for our community together. So we really hope that you can get that going here. I think you have that initiative for it. Linda?
Any questions?